Tom Kerridge, the Michelin-starred chef who told everyone to vote Labour before the election, is now absolutely fuming that Labour's policies are destroying his business. And honestly, watching someone discover that the leopard they voted for is eating their face is peak political entertainment mixed with genuine tragedy. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, and today we're unpacking Kerridge's spectacular U-turn from Labour cheerleader to victim of their catastrophic business rates policy, why his gastropubs are facing bills that have more than doubled, and what happens when celebrity chefs discover that virtue signaling in elections has actual consequences when the party you endorsed starts tanking your livelihood. I'm bringing you multiple videos today because watching Labour voters realize what they've actually voted for is becoming a full-time job, and someone needs to document this spectacular ongoing collapse. So let's dive into Kerridge's furious LBC rant, why business rates increases are absolutely hammering hospitality, and whether there's any coming back from publicly endorsing a party that then proceeds to destroy your industry. Right, so Tom Kerridge appeared on LBC absolutely raging about business rates, and the numbers he's citing are genuinely eye-watering. His Coach restaurant in Marlow has seen its rateable tax amount go from £50,500 to £106,000. That's not a modest increase, that's more than doubling. His Butcher's Tap and Grill, which is just a local boozers doing burgers and fries with sport on the telly, has gone from $50,000 a year to $124,000, a £74,000 increase for a small pub that's not generating massive revenues. Those numbers aren't sustainable, they're business killing. Kerridge is explaining that he's got 4 spaces, 4 pubs, and all of them are seeing increases of over 100%. The Treasury relief that the government's offering, he says it's just softening the blow, killing you off over 2 to 3 years instead of immediately. It's the economic equivalent of being strangled slowly instead of shot. Either way, you're dead. It just takes longer and hurts more. The relief packages are only helpful for a short period, which means businesses are facing a ticking clock before the full impact hits, and many won't survive. His example of the Butcher's Tap is particularly devastating because it illustrates how this destroys traditional pub models. He describes the kind of pub where an owner-landlord lives upstairs, works 70 hours a week downstairs, and loves that lifestyle. They're not getting rich. They're making maybe $40,000 to $50,000 a year if they're lucky. Their rent's effectively free because they live on premises. It's not glamorous, but it's viable. But when business rates eat up all your wages, what's the point? You're working 70 hours a week for nothing. The pub closes, another community space disappears, and Labour gets to claim they're supporting small businesses. This is happening across the hospitality industry. Pubs, bars, restaurants are all bracing for significantly higher bills from April following the government's reevaluation of taxes. These aren't massive corporate chains that can absorb costs, though they're struggling too. These are small, independent operators, family businesses, community pubs, the kind of places that give areas character and employ local people. And they're being systematically destroyed by a government that apparently doesn't understand or doesn't care how businesses actually operate. Now here's where it gets deliciously ironic. Before the general election, Tom Kerridge was one of 120 business leaders who signed a letter endorsing Labour. 120 people who should have known better, who run businesses and understand economics, decided that Labour was the answer. They publicly threw their weight behind Starmer, gave him credibility with other business owners, and helped create the narrative that Labour was business-friendly and economically competent. And now they're discovering that actions have consequences, and the party they endorsed is implementing policies that are destroying them. This is the political equivalent of turkeys voting for Christmas and then being shocked when December arrives. Kerridge and the other business leaders who signed that letter had access to Labour's policies. They could have done basic math about what manifesto commitments would mean for business costs. They chose to endorse anyway, presumably thinking either Labour wouldn't follow through or wouldn't be this incompetent, or maybe just not thinking at all beyond wanting to seem progressive and socially conscious. The brutal reality is that Labour told everyone what they were going to do. They were never secret about planning to increase taxes and regulatory burdens on businesses. They talked about making businesses pay their fair share, about raising revenue for public services, about all sorts of policies that anyone with basic economic literacy could see would increase costs. The information was available. Kerridge and his fellow signatories either didn't pay attention or didn't believe it would affect them. Either way, they're learning a hard lesson about taking politicians at their word. What makes this particularly frustrating for observers is that so many people tried to warn exactly what would happen. Before the election, countless economists, business groups, and political analysts pointed out that Labor's policies would hammer hospitality, that increasing costs on businesses already operating on thin margins would force closures, that the math simply didn't work for small operators. But celebrity chefs and business leaders signed letters endorsing Labor anyway, and now they're shocked that the predictable consequences are actually happening. Kerridge's fury is understandable. Watching your business become unviable because of government policy is genuinely devastating. He's built these gastropubs, employs people, serves communities, and now he's facing the prospect of closures or operating at a loss because the cost structure doesn't work anymore. That's real and it matters, but it's hard to have too much sympathy when he actively campaigned for the people doing this to him. He wasn't a passive victim. He was an enthusiastic supporter who helped get them elected. The business rates revaluation is particularly brutal because it's hitting at exactly the wrong time. Hospitality has been struggling since COVID. Many businesses are still recovering from lockdowns, reduced capacity, changed consumer habits, and increased costs across the board. Energy prices have gone up, food costs have increased, wages have risen, and margins have compressed. Businesses were hanging on, barely viable, and now the government is whacking them with double tax bills. It's the economic equivalent of kicking someone while they're down, then being surprised when they don't get back up. The 5-year gap since rates were last adjusted means the revaluation is particularly sharp. Property values and rental markets have shifted significantly in 5 years, especially post-COVID when urban commercial property dynamics changed dramatically. A gradual adjustment might have been manageable. Doubling bills overnight is not. It's a cliff edge that businesses can't navigate around, and many will simply fall off it into closure. What's especially galling is that Labor knew this would happen. They had the data. They understood the impact. They did it anyway because they need the revenue to fund their spending commitments, and businesses are easy targets. Businesses can't vote. They can just close. And when they close, the government loses their tax revenue anyway. But that's a future problem. The immediate problem is funding current spending. So squeeze businesses now and worry about the consequences later. Kerridge's point about owner-operators is crucial because it illustrates how this destroys a particular business model that's been viable for generations. The live-in landlord working their own pub is a British institution. It's not corporate hospitality. It's personal, community-focused, character-driven. These people aren't getting rich. They're making modest livings doing something they love in their communities. And Kerridge's policy makes that model impossible. When your entire potential earnings are consumed by business rates, you close. There's no other rational choice. The Treasury relief packages Kerridge mentions are classic political window dressing. They sound helpful, they let ministers claim they're supporting businesses, but they're temporary and insufficient. They delay the impact but don't prevent it. It's pain relief while you're dying, making the end slightly more comfortable, but not actually saving you. Businesses need sustainable cost structures, not temporary assistance that runs out while the underlying problem remains. What we're witnessing across hospitality is a slow-motion collapse of an entire industry. Pubs are closing at record rates, restaurants are shuttering, bars are folding. Each closure is blamed on challenging conditions or changing markets or individual business failures. But when it's happening systematically across the sector, that's not individual failure, that's policy failure. The government has created conditions where huge swaths of hospitality can't survive, and they're acting surprised when businesses close. The employment impact is massive. Hospitality employs hundreds of thousands of people, many in entry-level positions or flexible work that suits students, parents, semi-retired people. When pubs close, those jobs disappear. The 16-year-old working weekends, the university student doing bar shifts, the single parent working around school hours, they all lose opportunities. But that doesn't show up in immediate statistics. It just quietly increases unemployment and reduces economic activity. The community impact is equally significant, but harder to quantify. When the local pub closes, communities lose gathering places, social fiber weakens, isolation increases, especially for elderly people for whom the pub might be their main social outlet. These aren't just businesses, they're community infrastructure that happens to operate commercially. Destroying them has ripple effects far beyond simple economic calculations. Kerridge is describing exactly what happens when politicians make policy without understanding how businesses actually operate. They see business rates as a revenue source, tweak the numbers to increase income, and assume businesses will just absorb costs. They don't think through the marginal economics, the breaking points where businesses become unviable. They don't consider that doubling someone's tax bill means they close rather than paying. Or maybe they do consider it and don't care because the immediate revenue boost is worth the future closures. The irony of labor destroying small businesses while claiming to be the party of working people is apparently lost on them. These pubs employ working people. The landlords are working people. The customers are working people. Closing these businesses hurts exactly the people labor claim to represent. But labor's leadership is increasingly metropolitan.